Going through many tutorials, I found a process that worked perfectly for this setup. So we'll start with setting up the front piece. Select the jacket first, then the front piece. Control Tab to go into weight paint mode. Oh, had to go in there. Thought we were going to paint something, didn't you? Then we're going to go to weights. Select transfer weights. For vertex mapping, we're going to select nearest face interpolated and have a radius of 5. And instead of active layer, we're going to go to by name, go back into object mode, modifier tab, armature modifier, and then we will select the armature that we had from before. So as you can see, it adjusted the position of our front piece, but that's totally fine, not a big deal. All we have to do is just go into side mode and pull it back. Now, because I wanted to keep the angle of its location, I went from global transform and changed it to normal. So we'll just bring it back and down. And just try to line it up as it was before. It's kind of a byproduct of the weight transfer, but as you can see, it's totally fine and still looks really good. So we're going to repeat the same process for the buttons, but with an extra step. So we'll select the front piece, then shift select the buttons, Control Tab to go into weight paint mode, select weights. We see here that it kept the same settings from before, so we didn't have to make any changes, including the by name. Back to the modifier tab, armature modifier, eyedropper tool, and select the armature. We see that it moved the buttons, which is totally fine. Like before, we are going to move those a little bit. We're going to move them down a little bit, move them back and into their original position here. And we now have our weight transferred to the front piece and the buttons. And let's go ahead and test that out. It looks like it's bending pretty well. We can see that there is some stretching going on with the buttons, which we will now fix. Select those, then shift selected the front piece and Control P to parent. Then followed up by selecting the front piece, shift selecting the jacket, and Control P to parent as well. So it's a bit of a multi-step process, obviously, but in the end, the results turned out great. And trust me, I did this what felt like 100 times before I got it right. So luckily you're getting to see it one and done, but man, it was a tedious process. So I'm going to create a new collection, which I'll just call animations, and import all of the ones that we downloaded from Mixamo as an FBX. So the first one is floating, the second one is flying, jump down, and lastly, jump up. And next I will just hide that collection because we don't actually need to see the animations as in their current form because all of that information is transferred to our T-post. They all share the same data, which is fantastic, saves me so much time. It'll save you a lot of time. We can keep moving with our process. We'll select our armature here. Take a look at the animations that we have. So this is the floating. I think that looks pretty good. The buttons look weird, the animations look weird. From looking online, I've found that this is a common issue when it comes to transferring animations from Mixamo to your own armature. So plenty of things will need to be fixed, of course. It's not a hard thing to do, but looking at this flying animation here, we can see his arms are way too far inward. So we'll just need to adjust those. Take a look at the other animations we have here. This one is the jump down animation, and I keep looking at the buttons in the arm position to see what's going on there, because I could already tell there was a problem. It just hadn't hit me yet. And then the jump up animation. That's when I figured it out. If you look closely, we can see that there's some stretching going on with the buttons, and they went from being circles to ovals, and that is not good. So fixing these took the most amount of trial and error. We can look at this first animation, see that some of them look fine and others don't. And I tried to set the preserve volume, which doesn't do what I thought it did. And so the best way for me to ensure that it was working was to select an animation that had the most extreme squishing of this particular mesh. We're going to go into weight paint mode, and I used the vertex view just so I could ensure that I was selecting everything. Then go to weights, select smooth. I went to all groups and set a factor of 1 here. Try not to go way too overboard with your iterations. I found that 25 gave me the best look. And what that does is smooths out the weight paint that was distributed from the front piece so that it's not so extreme and they retain their shape. But obviously, if you add too many iterations, they start to grow, which is not an effect that we want. So 25 worked perfectly. And I'm just going to move through some of the frames just to ensure that they retain that shape. And it looks like it's working just fine. They're doing exactly what I want them to do, which is move closer together based on the shape of the front piece rather than squishing in an undesirable way. So I'll just go back to T-pose mode since I'm happy with these results. And like I said, this part of the process took so long. It took me a few days to find the correct tutorial for the weight transfer, and then another hour or so before I figured out that all I had to do was smooth the weight paints in order to fix that particular issue. So not fun, but it was accomplished and I'm happy with the results. So now we're through that part, and I'm just going to take a moment to rename all the animations to something I can easily recognize. So T-pose, jump up, jump down, flying, and lastly, floating. Now we're going to focus on editing the animations so that they don't look as weird as they do when they're going through the frames. So first thing is to select the armature and bring it to in front mode so that we can actually see which bones we need to modify. Start with the floating animation and select both of the shoulder bones and just go ahead and delete those. Next, I'm going to rotate the right shoulder bone by 25 and the left by -25. And press I to insert its location, rotation, and scale. Go ahead and test that out. Looks pretty good. The arms don't appear to be overlapping to the inner portion of the jacket on the side, so we're good there. We're going to move over to the flying animation, and I'm just going to bring down the timeline to its actual end for the animation here. This is a prime example of some of the animations from Mixamo have an in place while others don't. So what we're going to do is go back to the first frame here and go into pose mode, select the spine, and delete those keyframes because that is what's causing it to fly forward. Then press I to insert its location, rotation, and scale. And I still have the transform set to normal. I'm going back to global. Once again, we're going to select both of the shoulders and delete those keyframes as well. Go into top view mode here. We'll start with the right shoulder bone. And we're going to rotate it -25 and the left shoulder 25. Press I to insert location, rotation, and scale. Then we're going to select both the left and right arm bone and delete those keyframes as well because for this animation, because it's causing undesirable rotations and snapping, and we will insert its location, rotation, and scale for now just so that it's in place. Now if we take a look here, they're still pretty close, so I'm just going to bring this over. We're going to eyeball it. This seems about good. I to insert. We'll select them both, then go into side view and rotate them upward. Go ahead and test that out. Looks okay. They don't seem to be moving too weird, and they're both maintaining their rotation angle. Further inspection from the flying angle, I noticed that you can see empty space from behind him. So that is something that we will edit. So don't worry. It is yet another simple fix. Now we're going to take a look at the jump down animation just to see what things we need to fix here. So we'll go into front view. We can see that the arms are in way too far, so we'll repeat the same process. Select both the left and right shoulder and delete those keyframes. Select the right shoulder. And I started with 20 and decided to go with 25 just so that the arm wasn't overlapping into the front piece there. And the same for the left shoulder, we're going to rotate -25. So no overlapping. I to insert. Test that out. Looks great. Now, as you can see, his feet are passing over the Z-axis line. So that is something that you'll want to edit later. I left it alone for now. Let's move on to jump up. We will again select the left and right shoulders, delete the keyframes for those. We're going to rotate 30 and minus 30. Of course, don't forget to press I to insert. And let's test that out. That looks fantastic. Go ahead and hide our armature. Take a look at each one of these animations. They all seem to be working very well, and this is me. I'm once again focusing on the back part, knowing I'm going to have to fix it later. And I'm just going to put this back in T-pose for now. So just to take a break from editing all that stuff, I'm going to create a terrain for our Rocketeer to jump to flight. I generally tend to use the large landscape default. That seems okay. I'm going to change the subdivisions to 512. You don't have to, but I prefer a little more detail after I've scaled this up. Just bring it down a little bit. This seems to be all right. And I'm going to scale out just to see what my terrain is looking like. And I'm going to scale it up another 8 because it didn't seem quite big enough. So now we have a very large terrain. So we're just going to bring that down, which as we zoom out, we can see, yes, this is a little more realistic. So I'm just going to pull it up so that it's just below his feet. I will be bringing this back down because I wanted him to jump up from a flat surface. Because as you can see, he's kind of at an angle as far as his footing goes. And so next I'll add a cube. And I'm just going to Shift Z to scale along the X and Y axis only so that it doesn't scale on the Z axis, obviously. And once it's a good size, I'm going to select both the terrain and the cube to bring them down just below his feet. We will select the cube, go into edit mode, loop select the bottom vertices of our cube here. And grab to bring that down on the Z-axis. So it's a fairly large flat surface for him to stand on that also overlaps into the terrain and doesn't look like it's just floating above it. Now I'm just taking a moment to survey his surroundings and make sure it has somewhat of a realistic scale. add a new collection, which I will call terrain, and go ahead and select both the terrain and the landscape and the cube and drag and drop those into the terrain. And now I can hide it whenever I want, which will definitely be needed later when I get to the rendering process. So these textures I got from polyhaven.com. I wanted the pants to have more of a denim look to them, and they do have a denim material, but I didn't like the way some of the lines within the normal map looked, so I went with the book pattern because it had nothing but vertical lines going down. So now we're going to take a look at the leather material, which if we go into the textures here, it's kind of hard to tell just based on looking at the textures, but it works perfectly for the jacket. So now we're going to go ahead and apply the material, starting with the pants. So as you can see, the pants came with their own material, and this is actually our first time looking at it in material mode. So we're just going to hide the landscape so we can get a better focus on the material itself. We will then pull up our shader editor. We're just going to deselect this particular material. I put it to the side just in case I might want to use it later. Now I'm going to drag and drop the book pattern first. And I don't need that anymore, so I'm just going to maximize the Blender screen now. We are going to add a color mix node. Connect the color to A, and the results will go into the base color here, which gives us this. Now at the moment it's all white, so, and I noticed that the sides still have their own material, so I'm just going to delete that. Just take a look at it here. Then we're going to select our main texture, Control T if you have the Node Wrangler available. And I'm just going to scale this up to 5. For B, we will give it a tan color, which will change here in a moment so that it looks similar to how it does in the movie. Next, we will focus on the normal texture, which is a simple addition. We're just going to drag and drop the color right into the normal map node that was already there. In other renders and textures that I use, I normally bring this down to a 0.1. But after looking at the results, I found that it was a little too subtle for what I was going for, so I ended up bumping it back up to 1. Followed by connecting vector to vector. I'm going to move my normal map and we will connect the color to our roughness and vector to vector. I'm going to minimize these three so that I can pull them in closer together and get a little more organization for my node tree here. Still keeping those normals off to the side just in case I may want to use them later. Probably not, but you never know. Now let's move on to the jacket material. Drag and drop our texture window to one side. We can see that this has no materials, so I'm just going to drag and drop our albedo, which is either a diffuse or albedo. It's your choice on whether or not you want to use OpenGL or DirectX. Normally I select DirectX, but in this case I was working so fast that GL was used instead. So we'll go ahead and connect the albedo texture up. Control T to get our additional nodes. And we'll just take a look at the texture here. It seems to be all right. I'm going to scale this up to 5. Just looking it over and making sure it's all lining up as it should. Give myself a little more room. Connect our color up to the normal map. Vector to vector. Move our roughness into place and connect the color to roughness and vector to vector. Just minimize our nodes now just to get some organization going. We will focus on the front piece. Now if I apply the same material, the scaling is off. So what I have to do is click this user data button here, which creates a jacket 001. I'll just name it jacket underscore front. And so after looking at them both together, I decided that it would be best to change the scale of the jacket from 5 to 10 and then go back to the front piece material and change it from 5 to 3, and they basically match up. And now I'm just giving the material a proper name for the pants and applying a material for the buttons, which we're just going to do something basic. Name it buttons. Set its metallic to 0.5 and then darken them. Look it over a little bit. Set to smooth. I see that a few of the buttons don't line up all the way, so that is something I'm going to have to fix. And for the purposes of this tutorial, I decided not to track down a skin material. We'll just name the skin and set the color. I may add an actual skin material later on. I just haven't found one that I liked that was procedural. And there are some tutorials on procedural skin as well as a really good skin material on Gumroad that you can download as well. I will try to leave a link in the description for that. And yeah, just feel free to do what you like. Move on to the jacket bottom, which I noticed when I was looking at the fly animation. So what we're going to do is loop select these top vertices here. I'm going to bring them in just a bit. Then I'm going to E to extrude and scale them in, push them up. And then I'm going to extrude one more time and M to merge at the center just to close it off. Then I'm going to U to Smart UV project. Go to the UV editor. Press A to select the entire jacket mesh. Scale this down to 0.2. Press G and move it over into this little area here. And that allows it to have a similar material smoothness in relation to that bottom area of the jacket. Just take a look here. And I'm just doing a bend test of the spine to make sure that it's not popping through the jacket or anything. It should be following the same motions as the weight paint of the rest of the jacket. So after that test, I think it looks all right. So now we will move on to setting up the jetpack, which is very simple because we only need two and nothing extra or textures or anything like that. So let's move on to that. So I'm just going to make a little more room so I can see what's going on here. Pull these down. We have the jetpack selected. I'm going to go into edit mode. Pull this up. And create a new material, which I will call Jetpack Metal 1. I know, complex, right? And it's basically the default color. Give it just a darker gray, and we will give it a 0.75 in metallic. And initially I set the metallic to 0.75. After giving it a quick glance and then looking at the metallic settings for the helmet, I decided to go with a 1. We're going to bring the roughness down to a 0.3. I think that looks pretty good. So now we can focus on these top cones here. Alt J to convert the tris to quads. And if I try to loop select, it will select all the vertices for the entire mesh. So I actually have to go in and loop select each one of these rings leading up to the top of the cone. Not a big deal, just, you know, a little extra time. Just make our way to the top here. And I can't loop select these, so I'm just going to go into wireframe mode, grab our brush, and select all of those. Cool. And we'll just create a new material. which we will call Jetpack Metal 2. Now it is a goldish color, but it's not like the helmet. And now that I think about it, the helmet might be a bit too shiny, but I guess for an extra bit of flair, we'll keep it as is. Now this is okay, but I need to bring it down just a bit more. There we go. Set the metallic all the way to 1, and that's good enough for me. No need to turn down the roughness because it's more of a brushed metal rather than glossy. And then we'll just repeat the same process for the second cone, where we loop select all the way to the top, then add our brush. Apply Jetpack Metal number 2, and we're good to go. The boots, I will use the same texture as the leather jacket. So I'll go into that material and just box select all of the textures and coordinates. Control C to copy them. Go back to the boots material and Control V to paste. And then just connect everything up as it was before. Now I didn't want to have the exact same color because I wanted the boots to be a little bit more distinguishable from the jacket leather. So for this part, I simply added a brightness and contrast and just brought that down a little bit. In this case, minus 0.025 for the brightness. Also kept the same settings for the contrast as well. Now, if we take a closer look at the sole, it has adopted the leather texture as well, but we want that to be a different material. So Instead, I'm going to create a new material called Boots Soles and just give it a dark brown color. I use the eyedropper tool as a reference and then a sign so we can see now they look like a normal pair of boots rather than how they were before. You'll also notice that I Alt J to convert the tris to quads. That is something I do quite regularly. Just going to select the soles for the other side here and apply that same material. And at this part, I noticed that if I tried to loop select the top portion of the soles, it ended up selecting the entire boot. So I went ahead and applied the sole color first, and then unfortunately I had to go in and brush select this top edge of the soles so that I could have it all match the same color. So we're just going to go ahead and speed through this.